You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. I recently had the pleasure of getting a book read by PAL Reading Services, and the experience from start to finish was smooth as butter. There was a niche book from the 70s that never had an audiobook version made for it that I really wanted to read after recommendation. I sent in a simple email to PAL with the title of the book. Someone called me back to register as a client. That took 5 minutes. Then a few weeks later, I got a WeTransfer link with a file that I could import directly into VoiceStream Reader on my phone, and voila. That book would have been impossible for me to access otherwise. How does PAL do this? As a nonprofit, considering the huge amounts of book requests and the logistics of managing individual clients' individual needs, all while tiptoeing around copyright. Lucky for us, Susan Loube, the director of PAL Reading Services, is with us to explain it all. Good morning, Susan. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Good morning, Jacob.
Good morning to you too.
I can answer the copyright question most easily because the whole premise of PAL is that we're a bespoke service. So we provide books, audiobooks, upon request to clients who have a copy of it. So the copyright law states very clearly that a person is entitled to an accessible version of a book at no additional cost. So that's that part of it. We're not randomly recording books and putting them out into the world. It's
a one-on-one relation, right? You're working directly with a client. You're not putting this out into a library. That's the important part of your business model. The reason I included that was because every time I mention this to people had reactions like, "Is that legal? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Just create audiobooks?" But it's an audiobook that's personalized to you, right? Like when I got that one book from the 70s done for me, I can't share that book. That would not be okay. But it's because it was made specifically for me, which is awesome. You mentioned something that I'd like some clarification on. What does it mean to be bespoke? What do you mean?
Well, I think it's a term from tailoring, actually. It means custom made. So you would have been asked, do you want the page numbers? Do you want the chapter numbers? Do you want foreign language attempts at pronunciation, and you're allowed to say yes, no, and that all gets put in the work order, and the narrators work to that.
So you're the director of PAL.
I'm a director. I'm on the board of directors.
When people ask you what you do for a living, what do you tell them?
Oh, I'm retired.
That's easy.
Yeah, this is all volunteer for me. I was for many years a volunteer narrator at PAL, but now I was telling Nazreen I'm in a similar boat to you two, although a lot further upstream, and that my vision is not what it used to be. So I'm tiptoeing into audiobooks myself, and I echo a lot of the things you said about how there's a learning curve and it takes a while. And what I would say to people, actually, and I do say to people who are experiencing changes in their vision, is don't wait too long before you start that process, because the longer you wait, the harder it is.
Yeah, because if you're struggling with reading print for years, you're going to eventually switch to audiobooks or some other accessible format that works better for you, and realize that you could have been doing it so much easier for years, which is something I hear from a lot of people as well. Now, earlier I described the process of what it was like for me to get a book read by PAL. Once that process is done of a client submitting a request, what happens on your end?
Well, when the office obtains a copy of the book, they would go through a markup process where they would apply the work order. So they would in pencil, they would say what needs to be read, what shouldn't be read, if there are footnotes or figure descriptions, where they go, all of that. And then it gets given to a narrator. And after the narrator creates an audio recording, then that gets listened to, and any corrections that need to be made are made, levels are adjusted, et cetera, et cetera. And then when that's all done, then it's sent back to the client, either most commonly now, and our preference is that it be sent the way that you got yours, electronically. But we still have some clients who can't access that. They still prefer CDs, and we accommodate that.
You can accommodate a lot of different delivery methods, and that's always something that can be kind of difficult for people to actually attain, is like the way you listen to an audiobook accessibly. So if you produce an audiobook, what are the different formats that you can send to people for them to consume?
Okay, I'm a little bit out of my depth on that, but I believe MP3, but we also produce books in DAISY. So if people need them to be in DAISY format, we can do that.
Perfect. Do you ever send it out in CDs, old school?
Oh yes, yes.
Very
yes,
cool.
But usually only if the clients request that. If they're having difficulty uploading computer files or whatever, as I say, some of our clients still cannot do that, and so we accommodate that.
All that to say is there are lots of ways for people to access the material that you produce, and you can accommodate to a lot of different requests.
Yes, indeed. Because there are lots and lots of ways that people experience barriers to reading print. So you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution.
So who are the narrators?
The difference with PAL is that it's human-voiced audio. Some people are quite happy with synthetic voice, EPUB, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Our clients, and the material they require a human narrator.
Right, and who are those human narrators? Are they volunteers?
Yes, and the staff also are experienced narrators, but some of our narrators have been there for decades. It's a very fulfilling and interesting kind of volunteer work to be doing.
Where does PAL fit in the greater landscape of accessible library materials?
I think we're way off in one corner, but we're very we're essential in that nobody else does what we do. But we don't read the mass market stuff because it all gets read by other people. It's in the library. CELA has listings. They're available commercially through Audible and other services. So the things that we read are the things that are not available anywhere else for our clients. And there's still enough of that. I mean, we would like some time to be obsolete, but there's still so little in the scheme of things that is available in accessible format that I think PAL's going to be around for a while.
As big as CELA's library is, there are still lots of books that aren't available in accessible formats. And the books that they choose to get into their library, they tend to skew to new releases and new materials. So a lot of older books aren't available, even very popular older titles.
Exactly.
I also noticed, and I noticed they also struggle to get like full series up there. So sometimes you'll start a series and find that it's only available for like the first half on there, and then you're out of luck for the rest.
Yeah, we had a client, I remember speaking to her once, and she'd read 1 through 4 of a series and 6 and 7. I couldn't find number 5. So we were able to read that for her.
I always think it's really interesting to hear what books people choose to have you guys read, because there's still places to find it, like on Audible and Spotify if you want to shell out the money, and CELA still is a decent selection. What kind of books do people choose to read? Like, you must see a lot of niche, weird stuff coming through.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's fair. One of our subpopulations, if I can call it that, of clients are individuals who have lost their sight in later life. So they have a lifetime of reading behind them, and they have favorite books that they've cherished. And in their retirement, they would like to go back and read them, and they're not able to do that. So a number of people who've had technical backgrounds, whether they've taught math or science or engineering or whatever, their favorite books are never going to be recorded commercially. They're just not available, and right. They may well be out of print even now. So there is a brisk trade in those in our office. Sometimes we read specialty magazines for people that are not available. We have a number of clients who are interested in sailing, and there are some sailing magazines that we read. Some neighborhood magazines that get sent out that wow. People are interested in, but they can't access them unless we read them. So that sort of thing.
Can you?
And from time to time we'll read somebody's lease, or I remember once we read somebody's manual for their fire alarm. That's important,
I suppose you'll read anything, really. Can you speak?
Not so much personal emails. I mean, there are things that screen readers are meant to do and do very well. But things that people want to retain a copy of, such as a lease, for example, we'd read that.
Can you speak a little bit more on Canadian copyright law? Just so we can get some clarification on how, in what way is it possible for Canadians with this or with print disabilities to get a copy of a book made accessible? Like, how does that all work?
It's a murky area, I have to say. I think for new releases, agencies would work through the publishers and get clearance even before publication. So there would be an EPUB version or some such thing. For the space that PAL operates in, as I say, because what we're reading is not mass market, it doesn't have any commercial value. It's not going to harm anybody if we read it, and besides, it's protected. It's a protected use to read a copy for an individual who has a copy. That's, I guess, the best thing we can do is to create more demand, to make it more obvious to people that there is a need out there that is not being met, and to make it to work on the publishing side, that perhaps you could do a little more to support agencies such as PAL or CELA or the library or whatever. One thing that has always frustrated PAL is that employers will accommodate people in their own way. So if somebody needs something for work, they will give them a PDF that is next to impossible to read, but say, here, okay, this is your accessible version. And for us to go to people and say, well, we could make you an audio version that would be a lot more useful, because we can read the tables, we can read the mathy bits and make it clear. But the employers should pay for that, truthfully, and they don't. But we'll still read it. If an employee brings something like that to us, we still read it.
As an organization, what are PAL's biggest challenges in keeping the operation going?
Well, we're a registered charity. We struggle for funding. It's very difficult to find funders who will provide operating funds, because everybody wants to fund expansion and capital projects and things, and we don't do that. We do get a grant from the City of Toronto to support clients in the Toronto area, and we have done, I think, since 1991. So they've been stalwart supporters, not a large amount of money, but a continual supply of money that we count on.
Did you find that when you first started working at the PAL Reading Services that, well, I guess this question still applies to now, not just for when you first started, but in explaining to people what PAL is and why it's important? Like, what was that experience like, the communications you had with friends and family about what you were doing at PAL?
I don't think it was that difficult because my friends and family are all people who enjoy reading. So you can pretty easily convey to people, what if you couldn't read your favorite books? What if you couldn't get your schoolwork? What if you couldn't do your job? How would that work for you? So yeah, for me personally, it hasn't been a tough sell. But we do recognize not everybody in the world they're not all readers, and they don't all like to read the same stuff. Some people are perfectly happy with the library, James Patterson current novels, the latest thing. But other people want other stuff. So
you are listening to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski. We're talking to Susan Loube. She's on the board of directors at PAL Reading Services. Susan, what do you personally get from your work at PAL?
I found it extremely instructive on many, many, many levels. Because I was a narrator during times when we did a lot of academic work. My background is in science, so I got to read sociology and geology and geography and accounting and various things that I didn't actually ever study myself. So it's like, I used to say, it's like taking a course. You don't have to do the assignments, you don't have to write the exam, and there's no grade, but you get to read all the material. So that was one big plus. And the second big plus is just being on the board of directors. I've learned a lot about governance. I've learned a lot about how charities work. I've learned a lot about disabilities and the barriers that people with disabilities face. And I think it's made me much more of an advocate than I would have been if I hadn't had that experience.
And you've probably seen the variety of ways that disability affects people. It's always a complicated field, and people need to realize that disability is, like you said, not a monolith. I'm amazed with two things at PAL. One is the sheer amount of work. You get quite a lot of requests for book reads, and a lot of these books aren't short, and it takes a long time to read a book out loud. If a book is 8 hours long as the audiobook, it probably took close to 3 or 4 times that to produce it, which is something I've been told by a number of different audiobook producers. That's a huge amount of work. And you're serving a really great purpose. You're plugging in the gaps and making books that would otherwise be inaccessible accessible. I heard that you've had to dip your toes into audiobooks yourself. How has that transition been for you?
Oh, it's been rough, I have to say.
Really? Huh.
Well,
why is that?
In the beginning, they put me to sleep. So I'd nod off and realize I'd missed 2 chapters. And so now I find if I keep my hands busy, if I'm doing some knitting or something, that keeps me awake and it doesn't take away from the listening. The second thing I've learned is that I'm very, very picky about who the reader is and the voice of the reader on the audiobook. Some people I just can't listen to. And the third thing is I'm picky about the topic. So if something is very rich in language, I want to be able to savor it. I might, if I'm reading Dickens, I still need to go back and actually see the language on the page and maybe go over it 2 or 3 times to take it all in. And that's just cumbersome on an audiobook for me. I haven't gotten to the point where I can listen and retain as well as I should, as well as I am able to with printed text.
It is cumbersome to rewind an audiobook, and that's something I always found really frustrating. I wish there was a shortcut or like a button that you can map on your phone, or some sort of extension or a Bluetooth device that would let you quickly rewind or fast forward an audiobook, because that's something that I do feel like I'm missing with print books, and that's rereading passages.
Yes.
Sometimes I can fully admit that I did not understand a segment, but I'm too lazy to go back because my phone is on the other side of the room. So it's a little bit like I can't really do that, you know? But this is something I was talking about with Nisreen earlier, is that you can develop the skill of becoming a better audiobook listener. It's difficult, it's challenging, but you need to constantly pay attention. And that's one of the drawbacks of audiobooks is also its benefit, and that's you can do other stuff at the same time. Your hands are free, you can do dishes, laundry, whatever, but that distracts you. So it's a skill you can develop.
But I'm not a good listener to music, so I'm able to have music on when I'm doing anything, because I can always shut the music out of my mind if I need to concentrate on driving or whatever, for example. Unfortunately, I tend to pay attention to voices. So there are things I will not attempt while I'm listening to an audiobook, because I will always go to what the voice in my ear is saying. And so I'm the sort of person, when I was driving, if I'm listening to the radio and it was a story or something, an interesting interview, I might have to pull over to listen to it because it was too distracting. So there's that. I mean, I have that in my background. I just need to find the audiobook experience that is as intense as finding that really good story on the radio.
I think you've already found one of the best solutions for paying attention or maintaining attention, and that's keeping your hands busy with something. And something that you specifically do when listening to audiobooks. For example, when I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm almost always twisting around this Rubik's Cube. It just keeps my hands busy. Otherwise, I would do just like you and I'd fall asleep. But all that said, do you feel like you're getting better? It seems like a necessary transition because print books are becoming inaccessible to you. Like, are you feeling optimistic about you continuing to read like this?
Well, I'm still exploring large print. I'm still finding a few large print books that I enjoy reading. So I would say half and half at this point. But yeah, large print is not going anywhere right now. I don't see that space any better.
It's exciting to hear someone's audiobook journey. I hope to hear from you in a couple years and see that you've become fully on team audiobook. Before I let you go, before I let you go today, if somebody from the blind or low vision community wants to get a book read by PAL, how can they go ahead and do that?
They can go online to www.palreading.org and use the email access there to contact the office, or they can phone. The number's out of my head right now, but it's on the website as well. The phone number is available. I would say email is probably better, and the easiest email to use is info@palreading.org. PAL Reading, all one word, PALREADING. So those would be the two ways. They don't always answer the phone if there's someone in the office reading, because we need to be careful about sound carryover and things like that.
Yeah, you don't want to hear the phone ringing while you're listening to your audiobook from PAL.
No.
All right, everybody check out PAL. They're an awesome service. And Susan, thank you so much for bringing all this information to us, and good luck on your audiobook journey.
Thank you.
That was Susan Loube. She's on the board of directors for PAL Reading Services. That's all the time we have on AMI today. If you missed any of our conversation, you can find a repeat of AMI Today on AMI Audio. It repeats every 8 hours. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms. Plus, you can watch the program again on YouTube right after it ends. Thanks for joining us on AMI Today. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. Thanks for listening.